The summons arrived in a sealed case lined with silver circuitry that pulsed faintly when touched, a sure sign it came from someone far more advanced than anyone in human command. Kale Vincent turned the sleek envelope over in his hands for the fifth time as the shuttle cruised smoothly through subspace. The message inside was formal, impeccably worded, and utterly vague. A request for technical consultation issued by the Theroian Empire. Not a request, actually. A summons. And it made no sense. Across from him in the cabin, Ambassador Mei Chun sat with arms folded, the tension in her posture betraying what her carefully neutral face refused to show. 3 months of negotiations, 12 diplomatic channels, and a dozen classified meetings just to get you aboard this transport, she said. And they still won't tell us exactly what they want. Kale leaned back, trying to mask his unease. Maybe they want to evaluate human engineering firsthand. See if we're worth collaborating with. Chun arched an eyebrow. They've never shown interest before. And let's be clear, their tech makes ours look like toys. We're talking about a civilization that grows armor from living alloys and controls gravitational fields with thought. No offense, but what could they possibly want from a human engineer? Kale had no answer, and that silence stretched between them as the stars blurred past outside the viewport. The moment they broke atmosphere, the landscape below took his breath away. Thyros Prime shimmered like a jewel in the void. Vast plains of crystalline formations stretched for miles, refracting twin suns through spires that looked natural at first glance, but weren't. The cities rose in harmony with the landscape, not against it. Towers pulsed faintly, growing organically from the mineral-rich surface like coral reefs. Designed by logic and art in equal measure, the transport landed with barely a whisper on a hexagonal platform that shimmered violet underfoot. No mechanical hiss, no jarring bump. Just silence and stillness, like the world itself had accepted their presence. The doors opened, and the first Theroian stepped forward. He was tall and slender, with violet-toned skin that shimmered with iridescent patterns, his eyes like polished glass. "Master Engineer Kale Vincent," he said in perfect standard, his voice calm but not unkind. "I am Coordinator Velnox. I will escort you to the Royal Complex." Kale stepped forward and offered the greeting he'd practiced. "It's an honor, Coordinator. I'm grateful for the invitation, though I admit curiosity. The term technical consultation leaves quite a bit to the imagination." Velnox inclined his head ever so slightly. "Her Imperial Majesty will explain the details personally. Your arrival has been anticipated." As they walked through translucent corridors that adjusted their hue to ambient light and even mood, Kale couldn't help but notice the design. Every surface, every system responded with fluid precision. Doors didn't open so much as ripple. Floors sensed gait and adjusted for comfort. Interfaces glowed, pulsed, then faded at a glance. It was beautiful, alien, and strangely familiar. He paused near a wall console whose control glyphs shimmered as if recognizing him. A flicker of memory, a tool, a schematic, something he couldn't quite place, brushed the edge of his mind before vanishing like a half-remembered dream. His fingers twitched with the urge to touch the interface, to try something, anything. But he pulled back. No, he'd never been here before, right? The corridor narrowed as they descended deeper into the heart of the royal complex, crystalline walls growing darker, denser, as if light itself bent under the weight of what lay ahead. Kale Vincent followed Coordinator Velnox in silence, each step echoing faintly through the polished mineral floor beneath his boots. It felt less like a building and more like the inside of a living system, reactive, aware, breathing. At the end of the passage, twin doors loomed. They weren't mechanical. They were alive, formed from overlapping petals of obsidian crystal that vibrated slightly with a harmonic frequency Kale couldn't hear but felt in the back of his skull. Without a word, Velnox gestured, and the doors peeled open in silence, revealing a vast chamber lit in deep hues of amethyst and gold. The temperature shifted. The air felt charged, like a storm was hiding just out of sight. The royal armory. Kale stepped inside and immediately stopped. Every instinct told him he stood in the presence of something ancient, sacred. The chamber was massive, its ceiling lost in darkness, but the center drew the eye like gravity. There, on an elevated dais surrounded by concentric rings of suspended energy fields, stood a single object, a suit of armor. It wasn't just any armor. It pulsed with its own rhythm, alive with embedded memory and force. Angular plating fused with smooth biometal curves. It shimmered between black and silver, layered with runes that didn't quite stay still, as if rewriting themselves when you weren't looking. Even from 10 meters away, Kale could see it was damaged. Severely. The chest plate bore a rupture like it had been pierced by a focused energy beam. One arm hung partially reconstructed. The back was webbed with fractures where energy conduits once pulsed. "Approach," said a voice that made his spine straighten instinctively. From behind the armor, a figure emerged, elegant, poised, wrapped in ceremonial fabric woven from some iridescent material that moved like smoke. Her presence was overwhelming, like she had been carved from the throne world itself. Her skin shimmered with bioluminescent glyphs, but more intricate than any Kale had seen on the Thoroians who greeted him. Queen Zerylin Velo, Master Engineer. "Vincent," she said, her voice low and rich, carrying the weight of command wrapped in velvet. "You have been summoned for consultation. The matter is urgent and confidential." Kale bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, I was told you would clarify the nature of the request." The Queen's expression didn't change, but her eyes, deep, violet and strangely human in their intensity, focused on him like she was watching something beneath the surface of his skin. She turned toward the damaged armor. "This is the Praetorian relic. It has defended my bloodline for 6 generations. It is not a symbol. It is not a museum piece. It is the apex of Theroan military technology, and it is broken." She let that hang in the air. "I've reviewed the damage," Kale said, stepping closer, eyes scanning the shattered circuits and split armor plating. "The failure patterns don't resemble conventional wear. This looks like it was deliberately targeted." "Correct," Zerylin said, now stepping beside him. "The weapon that damaged it was designed to exploit the enhancements added to the armor 5 years ago." He froze. "Enhancements?" She didn't answer at first. Instead, she walked to a nearby console and activated a floating hologram. The projection showed a suite of technical schematics, repair logs, molecular flowcharts, data Kale had never seen before. And yet, he began to speak, not from memory, but from instinct. "These compression layers, this adaptive weave, this wasn't part of your original armor design. This overlay, this is human patterning, spliced with Theroan base structure. It uses randomization algorithms to interrupt target prediction." His voice trailed off. The Queen turned to him slowly. "You recognize it?" I don't know how. I shouldn't." She reached forward and manipulated the hologram, zooming in on a line of annotated instructions written in 2 languages, Thyroin script and Standard Galactic. Kale stared. The handwriting in Standard was rough, utilitarian. The way the T's were crossed. The looped K, the shorthand for modular collapse. It was his dot. He didn't remember writing it. "You," the Queen said softly, her voice heavier now, "are the only man who has ever repaired this armor. You did so under unique circumstances. Conditions that required discretion. That required your memories be suppressed afterward. Kale backed a step. His mouth had gone dry. No, that's not possible. I've never been here before. I've never touched this armor. Zarlin looked at him, really looked at him, as though watching a locked door tremble on its hinges. But you have, she said. And you will again. Because the weapon that destroyed these systems was not meant only for us. It was meant for both our civilizations. It is based on your work, our work. Kale stared at the armor, feeling a pulse in his chest that didn't match his heartbeat. Memories he didn't have pounded like ghosts on the edge of his mind. Something had happened here. Something real. Something buried. I need you, the Queen said, and for the first time, there was a break in her voice. Not desperation, but gravity. To remember. The chamber fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the low hum of the suspended containment field surrounding the damaged armor. Kale Vincent stood perfectly still, his gaze locked on the suit as if it might suddenly come alive and speak the truth he couldn't remember. The feeling of dissonance grew louder in his chest, a strange resonance between logic and instinct, between denial and something older, deeper, clawing to the surface. I need you to remember. The Queen's words echoed not just in his ears, but somewhere underneath his skin. Kale turned to face her fully, but now he noticed something else, an intensity behind her composed exterior. Her voice hadn't trembled from fear. It had trembled from knowing, from hoping. You say I've been here before, Kale said, trying to steady his breath, that I repaired this armor. Worked with Thoroyan materials, but I have no record of that, no memories. Queen Zerlin's expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed slightly. That was the intent. She moved with fluid grace to a recessed platform at the far end of the room and activated another interface, this one more secure, buried beneath 3 layers of biometric locks. A tall spire rose from the platform, humming with crystalline energy. It projected a shimmering sphere of compressed data in the air, its surface etched with human and Thoroyan security ciphers intertwined in a fractal loop. These are sealed technical records, she said, created during a period of cooperation. That, officially, never occurred. A collaboration between myself and a human engineer named Kale Vincent. He took a hesitant step forward. You're saying we worked together? Yes, Zerlin replied, for 3 months. In secret. After you were captured during the border conflict near Sector 9A, you were never reported missing. Because your transport was rerouted by Thoroyan interceptors and your disappearance was managed. Kale's heart pounded harder now. You're telling me I was taken prisoner. Initially, she answered carefully, but not for long. I visited your holding chamber myself. I reviewed your service record, your innovation metrics. Your unconventional thinking intrigued me. When our primary battle systems failed during an engagement, I made a proposition. Kale didn't need to hear more. His mind was racing ahead, constructing the outline of a truth he had no memory of, but which made terrifying sense. You offered me a choice, imprisonment or service. Zerlin nodded once. He laughed bitterly, not out of humor but disbelief. And I said yes. You didn't just say yes, she said. You solved challenges our best minds couldn't. You adapted our rigid design systems with human flexibility. You created hybrid systems so advanced that we deemed them too dangerous to share even with our own people. And when I was done, Kale said, his voice tightening, you wiped it from my mind. Not wiped, Zerlin said gently. Suppressed, compartmentalized. There was no other way. Had the knowledge of our joint work leaked, it could have sparked open war or destabilized both empires. So we built an erasure protocol using our cognitive modulation technology tailored specifically to human neurology. I administered it myself. Kale turned away from her, hands clenched, breath shaky. Memories didn't return, but flashes did. Sensations, the smell of heated alloy, the strange rhythm of alien workstations. Her voice quiet in the background, not issuing orders, but asking questions. Challenging him, laughing. You said we worked together. But this goes deeper, doesn't it? He asked without turning. That armor, it wasn't just your project. It was personal. Zarelyn said nothing at first, then softly, yes. Kale faced her, eyes narrowed. Why? Why me? You had the best engineers in your empire. You had systems we couldn't even begin to replicate. Why risk secrecy, politics, and memory suppression for a human? Her voice was calm, but something trembled. Beneath it, because you didn't think like we do. Because you refused to accept what we called impossible. Because your instincts found pathways no simulation could model. You taught me that logic is not always the most direct route to truth. She stepped closer, her bioluminescent patterns flickering in patterns that shimmered along her cheekbones and collar. And because despite our differences, I trusted you. I trusted you with my empire's secrets, with my personal armor, and, eventually, with something more. Kale's breath caught. The armor pulsed softly behind them. The repair logs hovering in the air, the words in his own handwriting, the techniques he had never learned but somehow understood. How much did I trust you? He asked. Zarelyn looked up at him, no longer the untouchable queen, but the woman who had once shared midnight workstations and secrets too fragile for politics. Enough, she said, that you asked me to erase the memories, because you didn't want to risk betraying them. Not even under duress. Kale staggered back, sitting down on a nearby bench of solid quartz, his mind a whirlwind. He had chosen to forget, chosen to protect her. The armor. Their work. Their bond. A truth began to rise in his chest, not from memory, but from instinct. I didn't just fix your armor, he said slowly. We created something together. Something that scared both of our governments. And now, Zarelyn said, stepping into the light fully, her voice steady with purpose, someone else has uncovered it. They've reverse-engineered pieces of our hybrid work, and they've built weapons designed to exploit it. That's why I summoned you. He looked at her, uncertain and overwhelmed, but underneath it all, something else flickered. Recognition. Double quotes you. Need me to remember, he whispered. No, she replied. I need you to finish what we started. The chamber where Kale was to undergo the memory restoration procedure was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Even among the alien splendor of Theros Prime, it sat beneath the palace complex, deep within a vault carved directly into the crystalline crust of the planet, where natural resonance fields amplified the delicate manipulations needed for what the Theroians called consciousness realignment. The air shimmered with invisible frequencies. Polished columns of living quartz spiraled upward like frozen lightning. Above them, suspended in a dome of translucent mineral, was a map of his own neural lattice rendered in radiant violet light and annotated in Theroian glyphs. You're certain this will work? Kale asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Queen Zarelyn stood beside him, fingers dancing across a control panel made of cascading light. The memories were not deleted, only sealed. Hidden within your synaptic structures, untouched, but out of reach. This technology was designed for situations exactly like this. And it won't overwrite anything? Her gaze flicked to his. You will remain who you are now, but you will remember who you were then. Both truths will coexist. Kale gave a long, uneasy breath as he stepped onto the central platform, its surface adjusting beneath him, reshaping itself to cradle his form. It felt oddly comforting, like a home he'd never known, but had once built with his own hands. As the chamber dimmed, Zarelyn placed a crystal node gently against his temple. It pulsed once. He flinched. "Relax," she said, her voice low and steady. "Your mind is about to become a sky, and the storm will pass." The first wave hit like an electric tide. He gasped as sensations returned, not as fragmented visions, but experiences, real, immediate. He was 28 again, trapped in a diplomatic skirmish gone wrong. His ship had been intercepted, not by force, but by surgical precision. No damage, no threat, just redirection, a palace carved from stone and starlight, a cell that was cleaner than any human officer's quarters. And then, Zarlin had visited him not as a monarch, but as a scientist. Cold, curious, brilliant. She spoke 11 languages fluently. She quoted human engineering texts, his engineering texts back to him, dissecting his theories with both awe and skepticism. "I don't need your loyalty," she had told him during their first real conversation. "I need your mind." He had resisted at first. He remembered the long nights, the arguments over repair protocols, the cultural clashes, human improvisation against Thoreauian precision. But somewhere between failure and innovation, mutual admiration had formed, and then something more. Flashes. Now, her leaning over blueprints, smiling with eyes she rarely let soften. The two of them surrounded by diagnostic holograms. As he made her laugh with an offhand Earth reference she pretended not to understand. The moment she removed her gauntlet and pressed her hand to his, their skin meeting in defiance of every protocol. He had cared for her, deeply, perhaps, more than he'd allowed himself to admit even then. The final memory returned like thunder. The armor had been fully restored. They had done it together. But instead of celebration, there had been fear. Their combined innovation had created something powerful, too powerful. The armor had developed self-repair capabilities that could adapt to entirely new types of energy-based damage. It wasn't just defense. It was learning, evolving. Their governments, both human and Thoreauian, had demanded silence. "I will submit to erasure," he had said to her, standing in the very same chamber where he now lay. "And I will make sure the seal can be undone." Zarlin had promised, her voice breaking for the first time. "If ever the world needs you again." The present slammed back into him with the force of collapsing stars. Kale sat upright with a sharp gasp, sweat on his brow, heart hammering. Remembered everything. Zarlin was watching him from a few feet away, her posture stiff, eyes scanning for signs of psychological damage. But the moment his gaze met hers, something passed between them. Recognition. Not from one side, but both. "You remember," she whispered. "I do," Kale said, his voice hoarse. "All of it, every blueprint, every spark, every moment." He rose to his feet unsteadily, still dizzy from the flood of restored memory. But clarity was rapidly taking its place. "The adaptive fusion repair system," he said, pacing his thoughts, fell into order. "We used human stochastic feedback loops, combined with Thoreauian harmonic fields. We bypassed entropy through resonance matching, but we limited the field propagation to prevent autonomous replication." Zarlin nodded slowly. "The weapon that damaged the armor used subharmonic inversion. It wasn't designed to destroy Thoreauian systems. It was designed to dismantle our work." Kale's jaw clenched. "Someone out there knows exactly what we created and how to break it." And then another realization struck like a cold blade. "If they've weaponized our fusion methods," he said, turning to face her, "they haven't just sabotaged your empire. They've compromised human defensive systems as well. Because I incorporated some of our ideas into post-mission upgrades. I didn't remember why, but I did it anyway, subconsciously. I gave humanity pieces of the hybrid architecture." Zarlin stepped forward, closer than she had in hours. "Which means your memories weren't just sealed for security. They were sealed to protect you, because what we built, what we felt, was too dangerous. And now, Kale said darkly, it's not just dangerous, it's out there, in the hands of someone who wants to unravel everything. Her gaze didn't waver. Then we finish what we started. Kale looked at her not as a stranger or a sovereign, but as the partner he had once trusted with his mind, his work, and perhaps something more. I'll need access to the forge systems, he said, and to everything we sealed away. No restrictions this time. You'll have them, Zarelyn said. They turned toward the lift together, side by side. What had begun as a summons had become a reckoning. What had been forgotten would now become their greatest weapon. And for the first time in 5 years, Kale knew exactly who he was. The forge systems were buried even deeper than the memory vault, subterranean and shielded by layers of energy fields, harmonic dampeners, and crystalline interference shells that could deflect even directed gravitational scans. Kale descended, with Queen Zarelyn in a sleek grav car that traveled without rails or visible propulsion, guided instead by resonance pulses that hummed softly through the structure. The further they went, the more he felt it not fear, but something sharper. Anticipation. The lift doors opened into a cavern that pulsed with molten light. This was no workshop. It was a heart. Liquid crystal conduits spiraled along the walls like arteries. The forge's core, an immense vertical ring of suspended alloy and energy, hung weightless in the air, slowly rotating like a star being born. Workstations formed themselves from the floor as they approached, constructed from reactive mineral layers that remembered their last configuration. Even after 5 years, and they had remembered, because the moment Kale approached the interface, a familiar schematic unfolded into the air, a projection of the Praetorian armor, annotated in his exact shorthand, with layers upon layers of hybrid repair sequences. I left this here, he whispered. You left everything here, Zarelyn said quietly. It's been dormant since the day you departed. No one else could make sense of it. Kale studied the schematics, his eyes narrowing. Because it wasn't Theroian, and it wasn't human. It was something in between. Zarelyn stepped beside him and summoned the data feeds from the latest attack, the one that had damaged the armor again. The energy signature was distinct. An inversion field specifically tuned to neutralize hybridized resonance layers. Someone's not just replicating our work, Kale said. They're improving on it, counter-building. Zarelyn's expression hardened. They're targeting the very philosophy we created. Whoever this is, they understand our minds, our methods. He swiped through readouts, military logs, intercepted. Telemetry, partial analysis reports. The signature had been detected not only in the Queen's armor, but in skirmishes across both Thyrian and human border systems. The attacks were coordinated, surgical, strategic. This is more than sabotage, Kale said. They're testing the limits of our technology, probing weaknesses we didn't even know existed. Zarelyn paused. You think it's someone who is watching us? Back then, Kale hesitated. The possibility had been gnawing at him since his memories returned. There were moments, he said slowly, in the old lab, strange delays and diagnostic pings, interface anomalies I assumed were glitches. What if we were being monitored? By who? She asked, tone sharp. No one but you and I had full access. Kale didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted upward to the forge ring rotating silently above them, casting shadows like blades across the chamber walls. There's another possibility, he said finally. What if it wasn't sabotage from the outside? Zarelyn turned to face him. You think someone within the Forge project betrayed us? Kale nodded. Someone who had partial access. Enough to understand fragments. Enough to steal without fully comprehending. They wouldn't have the full picture, but if they've spent the last 5 years reverse engineering our work, They'd know how to dismantle it, Zerilyn finished, her expression unreadable. A silent beat passed between them before she said, "There was one engineer I had to bring in briefly, an intelligence liaison from the Strategic Ciphers Office. Thyroian, assigned for 2 cycles to validate the encryption layers of our classified data vault. I never gave him full access, but he was curious." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Name?" "Velcartrell," she said. "Rank, Strategist Prime, Access Level 7. Kale's gut twisted. Access Level 7 would give him partial insight into the adaptive algorithms, just enough to see their potential. "And if he's gone rogue," Zerilyn started. "He could sell that knowledge," Kale said. "Or build with it. Or worse, use it to pit our species against each other." Zerilyn's bioluminescent markings flickered sharply. "We need to find him." But Kale had already turned back to the schematics, hands moving rapidly through the interface. "First, we need to patch the vulnerabilities. Our armor is compromised. If we don't redesign its core principles, it'll remain a target." She stepped closer. "You want to rewrite the system from the ground up? I want to evolve it. Our last design was integration. But integration isn't enough anymore. We need emergence." "Emergence?" she repeated. "Not just a blend of human and Thyrian methods, but a framework that becomes something new from their interaction. A system that develops capabilities neither of us could predict. Something that can't be countered, because even we won't know exactly how it adapts." Zerilyn studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Begin," she said. They worked. Without pause, hours blurred into cycles. They spoke less with words and more with movement, Zerilyn layering adaptive harmonic fields while Kale coded uncertainty parameters into the energy distribution network. Together, they developed a reactive armor core that no longer relied on predictable logic trees but on dynamic pattern recognition. The new systems didn't follow a blueprint. They learned, and yet, under all the focus, under the equations and coding and crystalline resonance, something else simmered undeniable. Unspoken. It came to a head when they reached for the same projection node and their hands brushed. Kale didn't pull away. Nor did Zerilyn. "I remember everything," he said quietly. Her voice was soft. "So do I." And in that charged silence, between suspended particles of light and the future of 2 empires hanging in digital fragments, a realization settled between them like gravity. They had never really stopped building together. They didn't sleep. Time lost meaning inside the forge, where light bent to suit the work and the world above faded into irrelevance. There was only the task, the mission. The crisis they'd uncovered was no longer theoretical. The enemy, if he could still be called that, wasn't simply dismantling technology. He was dismantling trust. Dismantling them. Velcartrell. The name became a blade in Kale's thoughts. The former strategist Prime had been clever, precise, curious, and quiet. Kale remembered the man now through restored memory flashes. Always. In the background, always observing more than speaking. Always asking about redundancy tolerances and algorithm thresholds, questions that had seemed innocent at the time, but now evidence mounted. From sabotage logs to leaked neural interface code snippets, his signature was everywhere subtle, buried beneath misdirection, but unmistakable once they knew where to look. He didn't just steal from U.S. Kale said as the adaptive armor's new core pulsed to life in the heart of the forge. He's replicated our design philosophy. He understands the how but not the why. That's what makes him dangerous. He's twisting our work into something meant to divide. Zerilyn stood beside him, her expression dark. He's using it to fabricate conflicts between species. Our patrols think humans are testing forbidden tech. Your outposts think we're deploying new cloaked weapons. And meanwhile, he sits behind it all, feeding both narratives. Kale nodded grimly, and when war breaks out, he wins. A fractured galaxy, no unified defense, no joint progress, and no peace, Zerlin said. The armor they were rebuilding, Emergent Aegis, as they now called it, was unlike anything ever created. It no longer had a fixed shape. It could self-reconfigure at a molecular level, folding and unfolding like living metal, rewriting its function depending on environmental inputs. Not just reactive, but anticipatory. Not just adaptive, but creative. And it wasn't just armor anymore. It was a platform, a language, a message. Deploying this without addressing the political damage he's caused would only deepen the suspicion, Zerlin said as they walked the outer ring of the forge chamber, observing the final integration phases. We need a demonstration, a confrontation, something undeniable. Kale turned to her. Then let's give him exactly what he's trying to prevent. You and I together, on the battlefield, not as enemies. Not as pawns, as partners, in full view of both our peoples. Zerlin considered it a public mission, risky, bold, potentially destabilizing, and exactly what he won't expect, Kale said. He's counting on the old patterns, secrecy, denial, fear. He's weaponizing our caution. Then we make truth louder than lies. Moments later, their plan was in motion. Messages were sent encrypted, urgent, undeniable. A summit vessel was dispatched, half human, half Theroian in construction. Aboard it, Queen Zerlin and Kale Vincent would travel to a neutral zone where a known destabilization attempt was already unfolding, an ambush disguised as a trade skirmish. The bait was obvious, the trap well laid, which made it perfect as the Unity Spear, their experimental craft launched from the Forge's underground port. The atmosphere inside shifted. The stars above Tharos Prime blazed like twin sentinels. The armor stood between them, suspended in stasis, glowing with purpose. Status? Kale asked, voice clipped with tension as he interfaced with the ship's core. Coordinates locked. Infiltration zone 20 minutes out, Zerlin replied from the pilot's station, where alien and human controls had been integrated into a single console, another message to those watching. We are no longer separate dot as they moved into subspace. Kale activated the CUM node that linked directly to the armor containment vault. Begin final activation, he said. Authorization Vincent Zerlin Omega-1. Pause. Then the voice of the AI they had jointly designed infused with logic, intuition, and something resembling personality responded, Emergent Aegis, online. The skirmish zone bloomed ahead in subspace overlay. Two fleets postured for battle, one flagged as a rogue human mercenary unit, the other a Therian outpost defense group. Neither knew the truth. Both were pawns, manipulated by falsified attack. Logs and weapon signatures planted by Velkar. We interrupt the engagement, Zerlin said, and present undeniable evidence. The technology, the proof, and ourselves. And if they don't believe us, Kale asked, then we make them. The ship dropped from subspace like a spear of light, emerging between the two fleets just as weapons primed. A ripple of hesitation passed through the opposing forces, uncertain how to respond to a vessel bearing both flags, human and Theroian. They opened a wideband transmission. This is Queen Zerlin Velo and Master Engineer Kale Vincent, Zerlin said. Cease fire. You've been deceived. The enemy is not here, but watching from afar, hoping you destroy each other. A pause. Confusion. Then hostility. A voice crackled through the CUMs, speaking from the rogue human vessel. You're lying. Thyroian tech was detected during the raid on Outpost Aria. We saw the patterns. And we saw a human subcode injected into the sabotage of the Zenthian reactor. The Thoroyan fleet commander snapped. "We know," Kale said, stepping into view of the visual channel, "because we built the systems that are being misused. And we can prove it." They activated the projection of the hybrid code, the fusion of human chaos and Thoroyan order, now twisted into a destructive script. Kale narrated each segment, showing how it had been altered, resequenced, and launched remotely. And then, to drive the point home, they deployed emergent Aegis. It stepped into the bay like a god of war reborn, shifting between forms, its energy rippling in colors unseen by either species' natural vision. And when rogue ships opened fire on instinct, on fear, it moved, and nothing touched it. The armor adapted before impact. Each projectile nullified. Each beam dispersed into harmless static. And then it emitted a pulse, non-lethal, but clarifying. Every ship, every station, every screen lit up with data proving the sabotage had originated from a shadow network code traced back to Velkartrell, a traitor not to one species, but to both. Silence. Then, "Stand down," came the order from both sides. Zarelin exhaled slowly. "They believe." But Kale's eyes were already narrowing at a flashing data burst. A final encrypted message had just been detected, broadcast on a hidden frequency. From Velkar himself. "You've revealed yourselves. Good. Now let's see what your union is really capable of. When everything burns." The next threat was already in motion, and this time it wasn't sabotage. It was war. The sky above Tharos Prime darkened as emergency codes swept through military and diplomatic channels alike. Velkartrell's final transmission wasn't a bluff, it was a declaration. Deep space intelligence. Relays confirmed it. A fleet of hybrid warships had exited null space near the contested orbitals around Kelros 9. They bore no flag, answered no hails, and deployed an armament signature that sent alarm bells screaming through both human and Thoroyan command networks. Their core reactors pulsed with energy fields identical to the stolen fusion tech Kale and Zarelin had once pioneered in secrecy. "He's building his own faction," Kale said, pacing the command deck of the Unity Spear, his voice tight with realization. A breakaway movement, engineers, defectors, loyalists from both sides, armed with our blueprints, but twisted to destroy. "He's forcing the future," Zarelin said, her tone ice-cold as she studied the incoming battle schematics. "A future without us, without diplomacy, without unity. Just dominance through stolen synthesis." Their public demonstration had delayed the fleets at the neutral skirmish, but now the real test had arrived. Velkar's forces weren't attacking from the shadows anymore. They wanted the galaxy to see, "Look what we made," they were saying. "And look how easily we can break you with it." Thoroyan Prime Command scrambled defense units. Human High Orbit Strategic Command diverted 2 carriers, but it wouldn't be enough. Not in time. Velkar's fleet was faster, smarter, built with stolen code and refined anger. So Zarelin and Kale made their decision. "We intercept him ourselves," Kale said. "No more stalling. No more caution." Zarelin nodded. "One ship, one armor, 2 builders. It started with us. It ends with us." The Unity Spear dropped into null space and tore toward Kelros 9 like a spear hurled from the gods themselves. Behind them, diplomatic channels lit up with frantic objections, but they ignored them all. The time for committee was over. This was personal. The plan was bold and borderline reckless. Kale would deploy inside emergent Aegis, the only armor capable of surviving a direct strike from Velkar's engineered weapons. Zarelin would stay aboard the Spear, feeding him real-time data, running counter-resonance algorithms, tracking enemy fire patterns and system evolution. Because Velkar's weapons weren't just advanced, they were adaptive, capable of shifting tactics mid-conflict, Kale was about to face something he'd never faced before, a version of himself without restraint. They exited null space into chaos.kel Ross 9's. Orbit was littered with debris, both human and Thorian. 3 stations were already destroyed, 2 more on fire. Velkar's flagship, the Crown of Dissonance, hovered like a scarred knife, flanked by 9 escorts of jagged hybrid design, neither species ship alone, but some eerie fusion. As if engineered by madness and purpose, Kale suited up, the armor wrapped around him like a living memory. No metal groan, no clunk, just contact. Like a handshake from a past self now fully remembered. As he stepped into the launch chamber, Zerilyn approached. "We built this to protect," she said softly. "Make sure that's what it still does." Kale looked at her and touched the edge of her wrist. "We built us too. I won't lose either." He launched. Emergent Aegis streaked into battle as the enemy fleet opened fire. The armor read the environment, adjusted gravitational shear points, and deflected attacks that would have split warships. In two, it moved like light but thought like fire. Kale didn't aim for the escorts. He aimed for Velkar. He smashed through the side hull of the Crown of Dissonance and landed in a chamber, clearly built as a twisted mirror of the original Forge Cold. Angular, unrefined. Velkar stood waiting. He wore armor of his own, similar in shape but brutal in design. Red pulses instead of blue. Sharp, jagged edges instead of fluid motion. "Ah, the prodigal mind returns," Velkar said. "Tell me, does she still smile at your chaos? Or has she finally realized order was always the answer? You betrayed." "Both our peoples," Kale said, fists clenched. "For what? A weaponized philosophy?" "No," Velkar said, stepping forward. "For evolution. You wanted unity, I wanted evolution. And I achieved it." Their battle was brutal. Tech versus tech. Thought versus instinct. Their armors clashed, not with brute force alone, but with design, reshaping mid-combat, evolving strategy in real time. Kale had something Velkar didn't: restraint. He didn't overextend. He didn't chase. He didn't hate. He remembered Zerilyn's voice in his ear, calm and focused. "Shift to phase 3 resonance. Target his overcharged arc loop. He's burning power to keep you reacting." Kale did. His armor evolved. And then learned. In the next exchange. Velkar's strike missed. In the next, Kale's counter landed. Then 5 more, each more precise. Velkar stumbled. His system stuttered. "Impossible," Velkar gasped. "You can't." "Out-adapt me. I built this." "No," Kale said. "You stole it." "I lived it." He delivered the final strike, non-lethal, disabling Velkar's armor systems with a feedback loop of his own corrupted code. Velkar collapsed. The Crown of Dissonance trembled. Outside, the fleet, leaderless and exposed, halted. Human and Thorian forces arrived minutes later, encircling the hybrids, who surrendered without further resistance. Back aboard the Unity Spear, Kale removed his armor slowly. Zerilyn stood waiting. "You're injured," she said. He shook his head. "Just exhausted." Their eyes met. So much said in silence. They walked together to the observation bay. Below them, the enemy fleet powered down. Above them, the stars shimmered like the Forge's walls, ageless, watching. "We stopped a war." Zerilyn said. "We started something bigger," Kale replied. "A future worth choosing." In the weeks that followed, Velkar was tried not just for war crimes, but for corruption of scientific trust. The hybrid ships were dismantled and studied. But one thing became clear to all species involved: the only way forward was through shared creation. A year later, the first Interspecies Engineering Institute opened, the Forge of Unity co-directed by Queen Zerilyn and Master Engineer Kale Vincent. Admission required only 2 things: brilliance and a willingness to collaborate. As for Kale and Zarelyn, their partnership no longer required memory suppression, subspace codes, or diplomatic cloaks. They stood beside each other in the light. Together. No longer building in secret, but building the future.